My name is Alexander Richards, and I will be moderating this event. We ask that you hold all applause, besides the applause we already had, for the end of the debate for both candidates. Both candidates have written and submitted to me opening bio statements, which will be read on their debate. Now to introduce our two candidates for this debate. Avra is from Great Lakes, Illinois, but moved to Madison in 2016 to work for progressive campaigns in the election of that year. In that position, she had the opportunity to talk to hundreds of people across Madison about the issues that mattered to her. When it came time to pick a college, UW-Madison was at the top of her list because of her experience here. After arriving on campus, she worked hard to elect candidates up and down the ballot as a volunteer in the 2018 midterm elections, which saw Wisconsin elect its first Democratic governor in 8 years. While in high school, Avra advocated for students as her school's district student representative. In that position, she reviewed budgets and policies, all while keeping in touch with her constituents to make sure she was representing their concerns. She seeks to do the same here in Madison City Council for issues that are important to UW students, such as affordable housing on campus, public transportation in Madison, and how we can make UW-Madison safe and comfortable for all. Introducing Avra. Matthew is a candidate committed to his constituents. He's built his campaign on bringing positivity, accountability, and ethics back into politics. A current freshman at UW-Madison, Matthew is pursuing a degree in political science and is extremely involved on campus. As the founder of the Madison Student Chapter of the International City/County Management Association, Matthew has a clear passion for student engagement in local government. He's also interned with Wisconsin Conservation Voters and Associated Students of Madison. These experiences helped him learn about campus and community concerns, as well as how to improve them. Matthew's platform is rooted in the following core issues: campus and community safety, medical amnesty, diversity and social justice, homelessness, and affordable housing. He's eager to learn the nuances of each and every issue facing District 8 and to research and propose specific policies to help alleviate these issues. He believes that the best solutions come from hearing and listening to all voices. Matthew's not running for himself, but to create a seat at the table for every voice in District 8. Endorsed by many current community leaders and organizations like Progressive Dane and the Democratic Party of Dane County, Matthew is committed to creating positive change. Matthew would like to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come to this debate tonight. I would like to thank the Madison Debate Society for their work in organizing and moderating tonight's debate. Matthew is also thankful for the support of his campaign team and encourages you to reach out to himself or any member of the team after tonight's debate. Again, thank you for being here tonight. Let's reach forward. Matthew Mitnick, student for students. Introducing Matthew Mitnick. Thank you both for coming tonight. We will have at most 45 minutes reserved for questions directed by myself, followed by 15-30 minutes for questions from our audience members, yourself. We ask that you think of questions during the debate tonight so that they may be asked after our formal question section. Two of the questions during our formal section are submitted by our candidates prior to the debate. Order of the responses has been decided before the debate by a coin flip, and it has been decided that Reddy will begin the first response. Response orders will flip for each question, so to not give any one candidate a specific advantage. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes for response, and the time remaining will be shown by hand signals. 3, 2, and 1 minute remaining. If any of you in the audience would like to get more water, pizza, or to use the facilities at any time, please leave off to your left and come out through here so that we don't interrupt any of the recordings going on tonight.
Also, one thing, there's some people outside. I think we let them.
First question, it is very simple and start us off. What makes you qualified
Madison. And during the campaign cycle, so during the 2016 primaries, I spent the majority of my time knocking doors and making phone calls. I probably knocked upwards of like 3,000 doors and definitely made over 7,000 phone calls to voters in Madison. And so the main thing that makes me qualified is that I've canvassed and I've made enough phone calls to reach out to so many voters in Madison. Last night I was actually at the College Dems International Women's Day Women panel. And there's a great panel of women speaking, and one of them specifically talked about how, how women need to have a seat at the table, and they need to be seen in political activism. And that really resonated with me because I've been a political activist since 2016. Knocking on doors and making phone calls is so crucial to talking to voters and to resonating with them. And so in my time as city council, I'm going to take that strength, my strength of being an activist, my strength of turning people out to vote, to the table. And I want to bring a student voice to the table, so that's what makes me qualified.
All right, thank you. Matthew, same question fielded to you. What makes you qualified for this position?
So local government is, I think, the most important form of governance because you know who your constituents are. You know who your representative is. You can walk down the street, you can see what the issues are. You know, you can walk down University Avenue, you see development coming in here, you see bus rapid transit potentially coming in here. You know what those issues are. And that's why I'm running, because we have a chance to really touch into the community and impact everyone in every little way. So what makes me qualified is I have experience with local government working through the city process to make these things happen. In my past, I formed a nonprofit chapter to help underserved youth, and we took 60 underserved youth to various baseball games, basketball games. We held a summer camp for them at a local park, and that was kind of my first experience in local government because to make these things happen, we had to get permits from the park district, from the city. We hosted a 5K fundraiser race, actually 2 of them, to make that happen, and we had to get $1.2 million worth of insurance to make that happen. We had to go through that process, and that's what the city council is about. It's about taking the issues that you face in your everyday life and making that happen. Here at UW-Madison, I formed the International City/County Management Student Association. As geeky as that sounds, I did that because we need to educate students about local government and the power it can to serve you, but also to excite you about it. Get you excited about these issues because they impact us in so many ways. You may not even realize it yet, but they do. Also, I interned with ASM last semester on the Legislative Affairs Committee, and my project was centered on advocating for housing insecure students. Finding ways that, with these rising costs of housing, which I'm sure we'll get into later on in this debate, how we can provide students with a voice and a way where they can counter those issues. And then also, as mentioned in the introduction, I interned with the Wisconsin Conservation Voters, and that's where I got my experience talking with people, working on that community activism, going face to face. We advocate for environmentally conscious candidates, from all different political backgrounds, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and that really gave me experience talking with people about the issues that matter to them in a way that's nonpartisan, which is what these city elections are. They're nonpartisan, and we need to listen to every voice, make everyone heard at the table, and elevate every single person through me as a representative to carry out your mandate and impact city through bringing that process to you. And that's something I'm very passionate about, and I think I've taken the steps to get to where we are right now, and I would be humbled and honored to continue that on the City Council.
Thank you. For our second question, what are the biggest challenges facing our district, and how can you work to address them?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned briefly, affordable housing is the biggest thing that impacts everybody. I'm a student, I know how it is, and we're paying tuition that is getting ever more expensive with each year, or just other costs. So housing is really important, and right now at the city, those costs are going up. And they're going up for a number of reasons. High-density housing has been pushed in this district, as well as downtown Madison, which is causing your rents to skyrocket. And we need to put an end to that. And some solutions that we can do to reach that is not just having density controls, but by using tax incremental financing. It's the key to funding for capital redevelopment projects so we can properly fund for housing. So essentially what tax incremental financing is every year businesses pay property taxes, and those property taxes go for our police, they go for our roads, they go for, a variety of things. And the excess money goes into an affordable housing fund, as well as other subsidiary funds at the city level. We can take that money to fund affordable housing projects, because let's say I, as a developer, want to develop, let's put in a 40-room apartment. To make that happen, they have to take out bonds, municipal bonds, to get loans. Well, with the TIPS money, it basically subsidizes them to make that happen, brings down your costs, and if I have time later, I can go more into that, but that's one way. Another way for affordable housing is getting you access to Section 8 vouchers, working with the federal and state government, building a relationship between the two to bring those costs down. Another issue that I think is so pressing is safety. And, this district does not have enough safety buttons. It does not have enough lighting. It doesn't have late night transit. And these are three things that we can easily fix on the city council at that level. For example, we have 120 emergency buttons on this campus. I was at a door the other night and I was told by a student who works in a division of the university chancellor's office that only 12 are working. When I heard that, I was just like, are you serious? Only 12 are working. So we need to implement the blue light system. You need to be able to see these lights at night. There needs to be at least 600 to meet the needs of the district, and something I would do at the city level would be having more buttons in the apartment areas by Spring Street, Regent Street. There's very poor lighting there. We could have better lighting there, more emergency buttons, and then finally, better transportation. The 80 is always full. It doesn't run throughout the night. It only runs every hour on weekends. But with bus rapid transit, it's a bus system that has its own lane, its own light system. It's faster, but it also runs throughout the night. So if a student is studying in a library, we don't have to worry about how we can get back or which is the safest route. With an adequate bus system, we can make that happen. So I think these are safety and housing are two very big issues, and there's many more other issues that I hope to cover in this debate, but those are two of the most pressing concerns.
All right, thank you. Right, Avra, same question to you. What are the biggest challenges facing in the district, and how can we address them?
Yeah, so I think that the three biggest issues facing our district are sustainability, public safety, and then affordable housing. So in terms of sustainability, my plans are pretty simple. We need to push the city to go to 100% renewable energy, and then also support sustainable housing. We also need to reduce food waste. We need to promote the use of businesses to create a sustainable environment and to take their excess food and give it to people in need. And then we also need to foster public transportation and better public transportation systems that we're not using so much fuel emission with cars. In terms of public safety, we need to create late night bus transportation. Public transportation basically ties into every issue we're facing. Late night bus transportation provides people with access to safe and easy transportation at night so that they are less at risk of being attacked. We also need to get the city to sign off on medical amnesty, and we need to increase relationships between police and students. In terms of affordable housing, we need to build more affordable units on campus and support sustainable housing. And with affordable housing, we need to create transportation that will access poorer areas of the city so that people living in those areas have access to transportation as well. So just to reiterate, the three biggest issues that I think are facing our district are sustainability, public safety, and affordable housing.
Thank you. District 8 is largely a student district, going from Lakeshore all the way to, and contains thousands of constituents, including many who are in our audience today. How do you plan on keeping in touch with your constituents in the meetings, given your size and perhaps people that we can back you up?
Yeah, well, I'm a student for all students, and so I think that one way to increase my relationship with my constituents is to use social media. Students use social media so frequently that I think that's the best way to reach out to them. And so by using social media and knocking on doors, that's how I plan to reach out to my constituents. The other thing that I would like to do is once or so a semester, I would like to hold town halls to hear students out.
So I think the best way to connect with people is not online, but it's by face-to-face contact. That's how you build relationships. When I interned for an assembly member, they said you don't get on the phone and you don't call the people, you have to go into the community and you have to meet with them and you have to talk with them. Because relationships are not built on the phone, they're not built through a screen, they're built through people. So something that I would do would be to host quarterly town halls, and not only would it be a place for you all to come and you could share what matters to you, what we can do to impact our community, but we would also have 2 to 3 city staff at these town halls, and we would have them compile an implementation report of both short and long-term goals from that town hall meeting to directly address those needs. Also transparency, that's the theme of the campaign. Our team, I've said that so many times, but everything we do, we want to share with you. So we would use the city blog to have a weekly update. What meetings am I going to? What is happening at those meetings? How can we get students involved? There's so many city committees at the city level. I sit on a few of them. We need more students on these committees. We need engineers on these committees. We need people in the arts, on the arts initiative committees. We need to really use what we have on this campus, in this district, and we need to utilize the skills of everybody to create an inclusive community for everybody. Another thing that we've done as a campaign, there's 11,827 people in District 8, and our goal is to knock on every single door. And we've actually hit about 80% of those doors so far, and we've had more than 1,000 conversations. And that's how our platform has been developed. Not through my experiences or who I am, but by talking to the community. Talking to students and what they care about, elevating people in their stories, and by doing that, we can take those issues and then using my knowledge of city process, of what we can do at that level, and bringing that to you to create that measurable change. So, in all, at the end of the day, it's all about connecting with the community, having those events, having those connections, working together to create that change. And you can do that through doors, you can do that through social media, but really you have to have face-to-face contact. You have to show them what the issues are and how we can fix them.
Thank you. The following question was submitted by Matthew. Is high-density housing the solution to affordable housing? Why have costs risen in the district, and what incentivizes developers to not to charge high prices?
Okay, so as I reiterated earlier, high-density housing is the reason why we are in the housing crisis we are in right now. And as I mentioned earlier, tax increment financing is the way. So essentially, I'm going to draw a little graph here, but this is basically how it works. So here at the bottom you have years, so this is like a timeline, and here you have money. So right here, right there, that's what the base level value of housing is. So let's say I'm a developer and I want to, put an apartment building in. This is the base value of what that project costs. But through tax incremental financing, what we do is, this is where the TIPS money comes in, and then over here is what the value is of that housing project. So essentially, when you invest with TIPS money into housing projects, what you do is it raises the property level values of your apartment complex. And by doing so, the property value goes up. When the property value goes up, they're paying more in taxes, there's more money in tips. So then when we're funding affordable housing projects, there is more money to go around to have that sustainable housing. So I know that could be very confusing, but essentially what TIPS is doing is we're investing in the community. When you invest in the community, you're investing in us. And when you're doing that, you are having capital redevelopment projects. And when you do that, it increases the value of each development, which brings down our costs exponentially. So high-density housing, what that's doing is we are having developers come in, they're having expensive units. 222 North Charter Street is the best example of that. Adrian Lampron, who is our field director, spoke on my behalf at that meeting, and Steve Brown, a notable developer in the city, wanted to develop at Union South a 12-story apartment complex, which would cost $2,000 per month, which is just not sustainable, that is not affordable. And what that would have done is it would have exponentially risen market value prices. When you rise market value prices, that's why we're paying over $900 a month for our little dorms. And that is not okay. So we thankfully got that project shut down because it did not fall within the framework of zoning. But if that project was a TIFs project, what would have done is the base value would be here, be funded through TIFs, the property values are up here, they're paying more in property taxes, so when the next developer wants to come in, there's an affordable housing setback. Affordable housing setbacks ensure that 20 to 30% of those units have to be affordable, they have to be under $500 a month, so that there is an adequate level of housing for everybody in this district. So again, TIFs is really what it all is you're taking the property values of what you're having, you're investing, and by investing you're raising the property level values, and you're also ensuring that they're affordable. So it's a win-win scenario for everybody. So that is why high-density housing does not work, and this is a solution to fix that and to ensure that we are not going to be in the situation we are in right now. Because right now we have a TIFs closed district, meaning we are not getting that money. Our property values are staying time. Thank you.
Same question to you, Avra. Why is high-density housing the solution to affordable housing? Why are costs risen in the district? And what incentive should be given to developers to keep costs down?
Yeah. So we need to increase high-density housing, and we need to build up, to put it quite simply. So when we don't develop, prices go up. What's happening right now in the 8th district is the population is increasing. We're gaining more students in UW-Madison, but we're not increasing the amount of housing that we have in district, which builds prices up. Personally, I know that I signed my lease for next year in October, which is crazy. I have friends going to other colleges who signed their lease in December. And I had to sign that early because we have no housing in this district. I am in favor of the lot on 222 Charter Street because instead of there being a building built now that would increase housing in the district, the university wants to use it for a building for their new computer science program. And while I support education, I think it's really important that we build up and then we increase housing. To put it quite simply, when we increase housing, we drive prices down. And high-density housing is really important because we're creating more housing in a small amount of space. And with the amount of growth that Madison is expected to see in the next 5 years, we need more housing. And so shooting down housing ideas is not going to help this district. We need to drive down prices by building more housing.
Thank you. Madison, compared to the rest of Wisconsin, is comparatively a very large university. So transportation is a large issue to constituents and students like us. How can we improve the district's transportation system?
So there are a few ideas going around. The first thing that I don't know if you guys have heard about is Madison's bus rapid transit system. Madison is expected to see a bus rapid transit system come in over the next 5 years. And the bus rapid transit system is expected to see one line. And that line is expected to run from the east to the west side. And so I support that line. I think that instilling a bus rapid transit system in our city, even if it is one line, and creating the initial foundation for that is really important because then as that line grows, we can see growth off of it and we can expand bus rapid transit to other parts of the city. But as for specifics in the 8th district, I think we need to look into how we can run the 80 more. We need to be running the 80 at night because it's really important that students who don't have access to transportation or who can't afford an Uber have transportation through the 80 in late times of the night. And we also need, actually, let me stop there.
Thank you. Same question to you,
So, yeah, so bus rapid transit was mentioned earlier. That's a great solution because it's a faster bus. It actually holds more people, which is really important for since the 80 is so crowded. And then also it has its own lane, and the lights are actually synchronized, so it doesn't stop until you reach that bus stop. City engineers were telling me about it. It sounds really, really cool. And it would just really shorten our commute times. But also what bus rapid transit would do is it would bring this community together. For students who work farther away, for people who live on the north side, south side, people who can't even get to the isthmus, it would really bring us together. I do know that there are many people who live in Fitchburg. Want to know why they live in Fitchburg? Because of high-density housing. And because of that, they have to rely on these hour-and-a-half buses to get into the district. So with bus rapid transit, a 2-mile ride does not take an hour anymore, it'll take 10 minutes. But because of high density housing, that's why they're actually pushed farther out, because liken it to cars. It's like, let's say we have 20 Mercedes-Benz dealers in the city. Great, we're having more cars in the city, but what good is having 20 Mercedes-Benz dealers if we can't actually afford those Mercedes? And that is what's happening with high-density housing, because a developer is incentivized to have the most expensive housing they can, but with TIFs and with what we have here, what it is it's ensuring, yes, we do have housing. Yes, through TIFs, these developers are required to develop, but 20 to 30% of the units have to be affordable. There can still be some expensive units for the other 60 to 70%, but because they're accepting TIFs money to develop, because that's how they build the building. They're building it through this money, and when they're doing that, it's ensuring that, okay, the agreement is you have to have this amount of affordable housing units, and that allows for the development of the city as a whole. And TIFs money can actually be allocated for transportation as well. So if we're investing in capital redevelopment projects and we are revitalizing better transportation options with more increased access to transportation, we're naturally going to have more housing, we're naturally going to have more stores, and it's going to really provide commerce for all of District 8. So all these issues, they tie in with one another. And that's why it's really important to look at everything in the big picture. If we want better transportation, okay, that's great, and that's going to happen. But now that we're more connected, what about these areas? Well, now that this area is connected to District 8, you look at the parts by Spring Street, Regent Street that are more industrial, we can look at, developing there. We have a shortage of housing, there's no denying that. So if we use TIPS money to redevelop that, through that increased network we have built through that transportation, it's a win-win for everybody.
Thank you. Many students on campus get a job or even two to help them afford their university tuition and or the housing payments that we mentioned earlier. How will you support Madison's workforce, and what do you see to be their biggest barriers to success? Back to you.
So a productive city is only productive if you have a stable and quality workforce. And that is something that I will promote and actively engage with if elected. I've been endorsed by the South Central Federation of Labor and Kevin Gumak, who is the president of trade unions and labor unions in this city. And I think that speaks volumes of the commitment I have to workers and to students who are working and to people who are providing the city with the resources that we need for it to operate. When we're talking about transportation and connecting the city as a whole, that helps you if you want to get a job. If you want to get a job on State Street or farther away, you don't have to take an expensive Uber or a Lyft. But it's really important to invest in people, because if you're investing in people, you're investing in the city as a whole. And that's how we allow for an inclusive environment for everybody to thrive. Another thing that is really important is permits. If somebody wants to create a small business, I love small businesses and a huge proponent of them. So if we lessen that permit process, new people who come to Madison can start a business, they can engage in commerce. We can have more people investing in this city of Madison. We are a growing city. And if we make it easier for people to come into here, we open up doors. We open up doors away from people being closed off due to de facto segregation, which does occur in the city. And if we can put an end to that, we can really make a more inclusive environment that, again, works for everybody and provides everybody that equality of opportunity to thrive.
Thank you. Yeah, same question.
So one of the ways that we can support Madison's workforce is by, again, building public transportation. If we increase public transportation to poorer areas and run later at night, then we are helping the workforce, because we're helping people who are working at 3 a.m. who don't have access to transportation, and we're helping people who live in poorer areas to get to their job through affordable transportation. Another thing that we need to do is support career training in Madison's public schools. We've seen a lot of controversy over the past few weeks with the Madison Public School District, and it's important to work with Madison's school board and the education committee to help those children. Lastly, it's really important that we fight the brain drain in Madison. Madison is a growing tech hub. A lot of those tech workers come from UW-Madison, and it's important that we retain those college students by, again, creating affordable housing and public transportation that makes people want to stay here after they graduate. And then one last thing, I support labor unions. I do have a labor union on my lit, and it's really important to support labor unions when we're talking about the workforce.
Thank you. This following question was submitted by Avra. Public safety has been talked about in the context of this race, but an overwhelming amount of sexual assaults are not committed by strangers, but by those the victims personally know. How would you work to address rape culture on campus? Back to you.
So I'm a woman, and so public safety has always been really important to me. Since I was little, I've always been taught to do things like carry a key between my fingers when I'm walking home so that I don't get attacked. Or make sure you're crossing the street or checking over your shoulder frequently. So there are a lot of things that we need to do to prevent sexual assault on campus. The first thing that we need to do is believe victims of sexual assault. We cannot shame victims of sexual assault. And one of the ways to do that is by increasing relationships with students and the police, and women and the police, so that students feel comfortable talking about these things. Another thing that we need to do is fight for medical amnesty on campus. So for those of you who don't know, medical amnesty is the right for an intoxicated student to call and then not receive legal action against them. And so it's really important that we support medical amnesty so that people who are getting sexual assaulted or have been sexually assaulted while they're intoxicated don't feel shame for calling, or they're fearful of getting fined or worse, put in jail. Like, we need to instill medical amnesty. And then, like I said, we do need to support and increase relationships between student boards, students, and the police department.
Yeah, your response?
So I think the first thing that we need to consider with that question is transportation. And if someone who's they're in an uncompromising relationship, and they need to be able to go home if necessary and not feel like they have to stay. And that's why a lot of rapes that's happening with people they personally know, bad situation, they don't have a way to get home because we don't have that proper lighting or that proper transportation on campus. When we're also talking about these issues, medical amnesty, like my opponent said so eloquently, is very important for us. I've actually met with Captain Friedman of the Madison Police Department, who he's in charge of like Langdon Street and parts of State Street, working on those issues. And with medical amnesty, no one should ever be afraid to call for help or to get help. And that's something we need to introduce legislation directly to ensure that someone isn't burdened by helping a friend in need. We can follow the example of the state. They've introduced an amazing sexual assault bill that provides amnesty for someone who's suffering from that. And that is why we need to look at that model and then apply that at the city level and introduce legislation, building that relationship with MPD and UWPD. Earlier this year, I took an 11-hour ride along with the Madison Police Department, and there were many things that were quite concerning that I saw on that ride along. And I think it's important that we have our representatives, when they take stances on things in the police department regarding medical amnesty or safety, that are engaging in those topics and working to see what the problems are and how we can fix it. And when it comes to safety, I do acknowledge my privilege being a white male, and that I do experience things differently than others do, but my role is to elevate others and hear what everyone has to say, work on these issues together, and using what I know about city process, the connections I've built within the community, to carry out your wants, needs, and desires, and make that a reality to improve the community for everybody, because there is measurable change that we can make and that we should make. And there is a rape culture, there's issues with medical amnesty and safety in this district that really can be changed. And I think now is a really great time to work on those issues and come within these next 2 years to measurable solutions to fix a lot of the things we've been going through.
Thank you. Many students on campus express concerns about the environment. What are your stances and your goals for sustainability?
So, as we saw, many of us, when we came to campus this summer, this fall, there were a lot of floods. There were a lot of floods due to the rising lake levels. So something we need to look at is facilitating a relationship with the county and working with the Lake Levels Task Force to see what we can do about dredging, what we can do about proper leaf removal, and get phosphorus that's being leaked into the lakes Like, that shouldn't happen. That's horrible for the ecosystems. Mayor Sogman proposed to lower Lake Mendota's lake levels, which would have detrimental environmental impacts. I'm not for that. I think there's other things we can do. We can create more wetlands. We can have rain gardens. We can have roof gardens. We can better absorb the water and the excess water that is congregating on the isthmus, particularly in our state / Francis Street areas of the district, to ensure that we aren't burdened by floods like we were this past year. More on the topic of sustainability, I think it's really important that we invest in net zero emissions. Thankfully, bus rapid transit does just that. See, all these issues really are connected, and we can create change in so many different areas through that. And then also with local businesses, sustainability is really important. We should incentivize businesses to have proper food removal, to compost, to recycle. And there's a number of ways we can do that at the city level through process, permits, tax breaks, and we can really make that happen. And I think it's important to invest in these sustainable practices because we're investing in a cleaner community that works for everybody. And through my time working with the Wisconsin conservation voters, learning about drinking water, fracking, climate change, all of that, I've seen what local government can do. And we can even build a relationship with the conservation voters to work and lobby our legislators to make this change. And I think we have great potential to do just that.
Thank you, Avra, your take on campus.
So one of the big issues on campus and in the district is food waste. And one of the ways that we can combat food waste is by working with businesses in the district to take the food that they're not using or that they're going to throw out and redistribute it to people who are in need of it. And that will prevent food waste, but it will also provide food to people who need it and to people who can't afford it. We also need to move Madison to 100% renewable energy. And then with the increase of housing that we should be seeing in the next 5 years as we decide to build up in the 8th district, we need to encourage sustainable housing. So housing that's solar powered or that encourages rain gardens, because with housing comes great responsibility and we need to increase sustainability in our new developments.
Thank you. It has been said over the last year or two that our nation has been facing staunch polarization in politics. What can you do to help bring our community together?
Sorry. So this is a nonpartisan race. I don't know if any of you know that, but that means that neither Matthew or I is affiliating as Democrat or Republican on the ballot. So we don't affiliate with a certain party. And I think that in a nonpartisan race, it's really easy to create open and listening sessions and to listen to people with different political values because no one feels like they're coming from a place of isolation, right? Neither of us is affiliated with a party, and that's really important because that means that I'm willing to listen to people with all different ideas. And then additionally, I would really like to work with student groups on campus. That's one of the huge advantages that you have when you are a student and a representative. You have this ability to work with student groups who specialize in certain things, like now the National Organization for Women, to sponsor things with them and to bring issues to the city that they know more about.
Thank you. Same question.
So I think it is really important to build bridges and not burn them. And I think it's really vital for us in this election, it's a nonpartisan election, to really work together to create that change. That's why I'm proposing town halls to hear from everybody, why our team has reached out to a plethora of student orgs to hear from them what they care about, what is important to them, and what we can do. And that's why we go to doors, because the platform is developed by talking to people in the community, by having those conversations. We've had over 1,000 of them, and it really, really speaks volumes when you hear what everyone says. And city issues aren't that partisan. If we're talking about development, transportation, safety, these are just issues. They impact everybody, and you can't look at them through a party lens. You have to look at them through a purely local government lens, and that's why we can engage everyone together. And that's why in the past at various meetings I've called for dual endorsements, because it's important for us to work together. Politics should not be, one person against another. You're not voting against somebody, you're just voting for someone. And we need to be in a position where we all can work together as colleagues, as equals, as friends, to create measurable impacts that can benefit our community for many years to come.
Thank you, Ben. Now, for the final question, for the section of this debate, simply, what compelled you to run for this position? What made you want to run for Alderman?
So when I was an ASM intern at the beginning of the semester, I was, as I mentioned earlier, working to advocate for housing insecure students. And I had to work with some members on the council, some urban planners in the Department of Real Estate at Madison City Hall, seeing how we can revitalize district neighborhood associations to give students a voice. Because neighborhood associations are so important because if your landlord's being unreasonable, if maintenance isn't being provided on your building, you can go to that neighborhood association to make that happen. The alder's the voice on that neighborhood association. And through that experience, I realized that there's so many things we can do in this community, and we can make that happen. And I'm running to elevate everybody to work together and direct them into how we can make that change, how we can, find a solution to that issue. In my past, I've worked with city councils, and I've just been dismayed at how, they're not accountable. They won't answer constituent phone calls, they won't respond to constituent emails. And I want to make it clear that I'm here for everybody in this room, whether you're for my opponent, for me, it doesn't matter. We're all in this together. And we've got this far, 3.5 weeks left until this election is over with. And I think, the fact that balancing schoolwork and campaign has proven to you that I can serve in that role and I can make things happen. And that is why I'm running, because I didn't hear anyone else was running at the time, and I felt like that we have the potential here to really do some big things and make this community impactful, not just for those in this room right now, but for future students who will come into the district, and then future leaders who can follow a leadership precedent that we set to really create impact and a certain level of awareness in the importance of local government.
Thank you. Welcome to the
So in high school, over the course of 2 years, I served as a district school board representative and student rep for my district school board. And through that time, I got to work with both students and adults working on budgets and educational policies. And so that is really what sparked my love of both politics and policy. And so that's one of the reasons that I want to run. I've seen the way that policy impact local government and impact students specifically, and I think it's really important that we get a student in this seat. Additionally, I talked about 2016 and 2018 and all the canvassing I've done and knocking doors, and really talking to voters not only in this district but in Madison. I've realized very quickly that Madison needs diverse representation as it becomes a growing and diverse city. We need to elect somebody that looks like the district. A woman has not held a seat in 26 years. It's so important that we get women into government. Today is International Women's Day. We need to start electing women and proving that women can take a seat at the table. And that's what's compelled me to run.
All right, thank you both. Now, for those of you in the audience, now is our time to do the audience question portion of this debate. For those of you who do have questions, please raise your hands, and we have some debate club who will cue your question as needed. Your question may be directed to both candidates or to one in particular. If it is the one candidate in particular, they will be allowed to answer, and then the opponent may have a follow-up if needed. A time limit for responses remains the same as in the first section. We will now board for audience questions. So raise your hand if you have a question.
I think I'll start off. Both of you proposed and support good and noble ideas to make what you believe the lives of your representatives to be better. However, nothing, or at least unlike pizza today is free, how do you propose to pay for these benefits to your constituents?
Question on funding.
So excellent question. That's why we have this great graph here. I will explain it again because I don't think I was clear the first time. So affordable housing, right? How we can have affordable housing units. We do that through TIPS financing. It's the solution. Essentially, what you have is if we're going to say, develop, I'm a developer, I want to build an apartment complex. What I do is I buy the land, I will usually take out a loan through municipal bonds from the city. But TIPS money will then go to me as a developer to ensure that I can pay for that housing. But where does that TIPS money come from? So basically, this is the base level property value of property taxes you are paying. If you are a local business owner, if you own an apartment complex, etc. TIPS financing, essentially what it does is it's a capital redevelopment. So what it does is it increases the property values because you're using that excess money that's not going for our police officers, that's not going for our roads, it's not going for our lights or for city staff, and it's going into other subsidiary funds at the city level. If it goes into an affordable housing fund, that goes directly to the developer when they are trying to develop a property. And what that does is if we use TIPS, it increases the property level value. That's how it allows you to create development. So then the value of the property is up here. So it's improved this much in this margin, and then they're actually paying higher property taxes due to the higher appraisal value of that property. Hence, with more property taxes comes more money into the TIPS fund, so it's a positive multiplier effect. So does that answer your question?
It wasn't just about housing.
But that was just an example. Then if we're talking about bus rapid transit, which is another $134 million proposal, the city has already allocated money into that through basic city revenues. If you look at the city website on the budget section, it outlines how that money was retrieved for that bus rapid transit thing. But essentially, what you have to do is with TIPS can go for other things too that actually can fund for other transportation initiatives. If you want more emergency funds, better lights, it really is very important and vital to local government. If you look at the city of Burbank, when they did their redevelopment project in the late 90s, they funded that entirely through TIPS.
About the environmental
Initiatives?
how
Yeah.
do you pay for those?
So that is something I do disagree with Avra on. I think if we're looking at affordable housing, we first need to figure out how we can make it affordable before we're buying expensive solar panels. What can happen if we want those solar panels is we can fund that. If that is funded, that is usually not funded by the city. The city usually does not fund those things. That would be the landlord funding that, unless there's a grant. So there is a grant process at City Hall. So we could look at maybe we could get an environmental grant to make that happen, but typically the city isn't involved necessarily in that avenue. Also, when we're talking about the budget, we have the capital budget, the operating budget, and it's really important to use the operating budget to pay for short-term necessary things.
Ms. Reddy, how would you propose funding the benefits to transportation, housing, and the environment?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we need to get the students to see because we need to make sure that we are allocating money properly. So take, for example, if we are funding parking garages in the city of Madison, that means we're taking funding away from public transportation. Students generally don't have cars because there's nowhere to park them on campus. And so it's really important that to benefit students, we put that money towards things like public transit instead of parking garages. In terms of TIF money, so the only way to get TIF money is to build new development. And the problem with a lot of institutional charter street is we won't get TIF money off of that if the university builds because the university is tax exempt, which is why we need to be encouraging new developments. So everybody answers your question.
Can I say one more thing?
I'd also ask about the environmental improvements. Would you
Yeah,
propose?
so in terms of the environmental improvements, so public transit is one of my main goals towards moving Madison to a sustainable environment because public transit is much more sustainable and cost efficient than cars. And so when we take money away from parking garages, we're discouraging cars. And we are encouraging things like public transit and bus rapid
I believe that renewable energy is great, but like, do either of you truly believe that 100% renewable energy is achievable? And if so, how would we do that?
Avra?
Yeah, I definitely do. So I think over the last few months, we've seen all these wonderful mayoral candidates come up and run for mayor of Madison, all with the goal of having 100% renewable energy. And it's so important that we're electing these candidates that do believe that we can get to a point that's 100% renewable energy. I think we've often seen this in the age of 2018, 2019 politics. We have people coming to office who have what seem like extreme ideas, but really they're just ideas that can be done, and these people are willing to work towards those goals. And so if I were elected, I would really want to work with the new mayor of Madison to find out how we can get Madison to 100% renewable energy, because it's so important. And then instilling things that are sustainable, like rain gardens and increasing public transportation to get Madison to a sustainable point is also really important.
So that's a wonderful question. So I think that renewable energy is great, but if we're advocating for students, we first need to allocate money for affordable housing, safety, these very pressing issues. And renewable energy is a goal, but that's a long-term goal, and we can achieve that through the operating, or not through the capital budget. So if we use the operating budget for those other things, capital budget we can look at for renewable energy, but it's steps. So for example, having bus rapid transit is a step, because with less people using cars, more people are using buses, that's sustainable, that's better. We have pedestrian-friendly walkways, we have better bike lanes. Though less emissions are coming out. So I see looking for renewable energy is, yes, if we have the money, great, but we should focus on over time investing in these practices so that, say in 30 years, we can be getting closer and closer to 100% renewable energy. I do know on my opponent's literature, it does say we want to be 100% renewable in 5 years. I'm saying right now that is actually possible, but we can do that over time. We can work with businesses, with tax breaks, with incentives to become renewable, and we can make a measurable process to make that happen. And then, as you said, I could touch upon in a later question, TIPS money actually, that is wrong. It is not funded through new projects. TIPS money, every time a business, house, whatever, is paying property taxes, that's going into TIPS money. What TIPS money is used for is for when we do redevelop, that's what pays for it. Judge Doyle Square is a huge project that's happening right behind the Madison Municipal Building, behind King Street, up by the Capitol, and that's funded through TIPS money. And right now there are issues between the developer and the city over allocation of funds, and that's something I spoke about yesterday at my Wisconsin League of Women Voters Know Your Candidates interview. And to fix problems like that, it's all about communication. But back to your question, we do this through over time, and we put the resources in place to ensure that in a set amount of years we can be closer to being renewable and just improving with each day and with each year.
Thank you. Further questions?
Yeah, so my question is basically, so we've heard a lot about both of you, like what you like to do for the campaign, what you like to do for our city, but I'd just like if you could tell us what you like to do when you're not campaigning.
Right, what you do when you're not campaigning?
So one of my hobbies is running. I like to run marathons. I'm actually going to Switzerland later in the summer to run a relay race up to the Matterhorn. But I think running really is important to me because it teaches work ethic and trying to do things when you're tired and when you're not always feeling the best. But something that running has provided for this race that's actually helped me is I've been to all 20 Madison districts because I run. And if I want to see, oh, what's this project happening at Judge Doyle Square, I'll just run there and I'll see it. Or the Tree Lane Apartments, that's an affordable housing first initiative that has had a myriad of problems. So I ran to it, spoke with the developer, learned a little bit about it. Also, when we're talking about the Avra watershed, I went on a 22-mile run out there a few weeks ago to see what that watershed looked like, what the flooding was looking like. So I know you said not related to campaigning, but that's just something I'm really passionate about. And also anyone who knows me knows I'm like obsessed with the Dodgers, so I couldn't go through this without mentioning that at least once. Yeah, and I think finally volunteering is something I'm really, really passionate about. I really like to help others, particularly youth, because they're the future. When I founded that nonprofit chapter in my past, a lot of those youth we worked with ages from 3 to 18. And they just could not connect with, they were actually in a low-income, affordable housing facility, so that's kind of where I got my first look into how this works. But when I was working with the youth, they really connected with us as young people because they saw us as mentors working to get them out of their precarious situations. And I think that's something of value that I will bring into this position because I'm a student, like everybody in this room. And when we're talking about these issues, looking at them through a student's perspective, we can make that change. We can address, how we are thinking, what is important to us, and elevating everybody in their stories. And I'm your representative, but you all are my boss. You're the ones who tell me what to do. I make that happen for you. I carry that out.
All right, thank you. Avra, what do you do with free time?
Yeah, okay, well, one of the things I like to do is exercise. I love going to Zumba at the Nat. I think Zumba is so fun. I also like to go out to eat with my friends on State Street. Madison is becoming an increasingly growing food hub, and I'm a big foodie. My mom's actually a chef. And then lastly, this is so cheesy, but I love to watch The Bachelor. And this is kind of a fun story that I've been telling on the campaign trail. We were canvassing the other day, and I ran into this guy, and we started talking to him about our campaign. And I was like, oh yeah, you should come volunteer for us. And he goes, okay, well I will, but just on Tuesday nights, because Tuesday nights are Bachelor nights. And we literally had a 5-minute conversation about The Bachelor at his door and who he supported and who I supported on The Bachelor. So I love watching The Bachelor with my friends.
Oh, thank you. I need to get into The Bachelor myself. Do we have further questions?
Alrighty. Since the policing of this community is very important because policy with regards to policing can determine which communities are receiving more pressure and how safe students are, I'd like to know what you guys specifically would do to address the policing of the community and improve relationships between the police and the 8th district for both of you.
So how do we improve relationships with
How they plan to improve police relationship with the community.
Yeah, so policing is really important to me, especially as a woman of color. And I think that specifically increasing relationships between students and the police is important. So like I said earlier, I've been working with student orgs, like the National Organization for Women, so now, and PAVE, who works on sexual assaults, and to support survivors is really important because we need to have them tell their side of the story to police so the police can become more aware of what's going on. We can also advocate for medical amnesty, and that will definitely increase relationships with the police. And then one of my initiatives that I've been working on while I've been campaigning is talking to Greek Life, and talking to Greek Life about how they feel about police, because Greek Life does control a lot of alcohol on campus, and it's really important that organizations who are controlling alcohol are working with the police instead of against the police, because when we're all working on the same path, we get to a better place.
I think, same question.
Yeah, so I think with the police, we've all heard many things, and I actually met with them and went on a ride-along, as I mentioned, because I wanted to see what these concerns were in action. And there's many things that I think they're doing right, but many things they're actually doing wrong that actually hurt students. I had a meeting, again, with Captain Freeman last week about medical amnesty, and he just outlined all the reasons why it shouldn't happen. And I just wrote them down, and I'm like, okay, when I get out of there, I was so happy, because I'm like, well, now I know everything we need to do to make that happen. So it's by, not just making these opinions, but actively engaging with the community and seeking what these solutions are. And I want to build a positive relation with the police. I want them to not be seen as our enemy, but our friend. We have much work that we need to do in that avenue, do not get me wrong, but I think we can make steps towards measurable change. We need to have safety town halls where police are there. So if people want to come with everything that they are upset and unhappy about, they can address them head on and we can hear their answers. Coffee with the chief is an idea that I've thought about with the UW police chief. Once a month, he can be at a local coffee shop in the district, in Memorial Union, Union South, and students can come and they can ask questions, they can say the problems, and it's to build community. And that's what we need to do. We need to build community, and like I said earlier, build bridges and not burn them. And I think if we can take the necessary steps to bridge that connection, we can really be in a better place with the community, and we can pursue medical amnesty, because now we know what we need to do, we just need to make that happen. So I'm really excited to work to counter that issue, because right now I think there are contentious relations that really can be improved.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for your question.
You keep talking about medical amnesty and why it's so important. How do you actually plan to get it in place and not just a talk?
So excellent question. So it would require legislation, and we'd actually have to facilitate a relationship with the state. I'm on the Legislative Affairs Committee with ASM, and we've had many lobby meetings about the budget that's coming out this spring, properly funding the UW, what we're going to do about tuition freeze, all of that kind of stuff. And in many of our conversations, we've actually brought up medical amnesty and asked, what does this legislator think? And as I mentioned earlier, there is a sexual assault bill, and it's absolutely amazing. And if we can expand that at the state level, we can use the city to sponsor the bill. We could even change policy within the Madison Police Department. We can take those measurable steps to ensure there's medical amnesty, to ensure that the caller and the person being called for are both protected. If you need to help a friend get back, you should not get in trouble, you should not be fined. So it's building those connections with our legislators and then introducing that in direct legislation, and we can directly make that happen. One of the reasons Captain Friedman was saying that we can make medical amnesty happen is he was saying, we need to make students accountable, they need to have punishment, blah, blah, blah. And I was just thinking, no, they should not be afraid of getting help for their friend. What we can do is, compromise. There's nothing on the record, no involvement with the police. Maybe they have to take a class, no fines or anything, but maybe they have to take a class just so they say, I'll never do it again. Or even eliminate that factor entirely, but working to bridge those connections, come to a consensus where we're not in a place where we're afraid to help our friends, because that's a safety issue, and we need to work to create that. We need to elect someone who has had discussions with those people about what needs to happen, what we can do, and make those steps, take those steps to create those solutions.
Thank you. How about your response?
Yeah, so in terms of medical amnesty, we really need to get student input. And I think that's really important, because medical amnesty is truly affecting students and students only, because students are the only people in the age range who are underage drinking, and students are under 21. So it's really important to get student voices to the table. So I would want to work with ASF in coordination with the city, and I would also want to talk to students who have had direct experience with being intoxicated and not wanting to call, or experiencing something that has to do with sexual assault, whether it's the student or a friend while they were intoxicated and then not wanting to tell anyone because they were intoxicated. And I would like people to tell those stories so that adults, specifically in the city council who aren't students, can understand why we need to instill medical amnesty on campus.
Thank you. We have more questions from the audience? You with the orange.
Yeah, in regards to Mr. Mitnick, so your campaign claims that it advocates for LGBTQ rights. What changes do you intend to make, and what makes you qualified to advocate for the LGBTQ community?
And another actually great question. So something we would do for that community is we have many city committees, and something that I'm committed to is having diverse representation on those city committees and ensuring that everybody is represented who wants to be represented. Also, gender-neutral bathrooms is something that, again, we support. And back to the phrasing of your question, when you're electing someone, I'm not just representing one group. I'm representing everybody. I'm representing District 8, but I'm also representing the city of Madison as a whole, because when I'm voting on these issues, it impacts everybody. If we're talking about the Treeland apartments, Judge Jill Square, all these issues, it impacts everybody. You look at our campaign team, people who support me, so many different backgrounds people come from, and we've listened and we've heard, and by doing that, we are facilitating conversation, and it's my role to elevate those voices to create that measurable change. If someone is feeling concerned, if they're not feeling represented, they come to me as their representative, and we can work towards a solution. So did that answer your question? Thank you.
Would you like a response?
questions addressed in
Have you more? In the back.
All right. What is your opinion on mental health? To both of you.
Just in general?
Yeah, just in general. Okay.
So mental health is something that's very important on this campus. I actually spoke at the SSFC meeting when they rejected the budget, which was not funding for an adequate amount of mental health suppliers at this university. So I think mental health really does need to be addressed. We really need to ensure that when students are going to university health services, that it doesn't take 35 days, which is the average. If I called right now saying I wanted to talk to somebody, it would take 35 days, and that is just too long for someone who needs those services. So what I would do is, as a city council member, I would be an advocate, I would lobby the university. Obviously, I would not have direct control over that jurisdiction, but I could use my position to, again, elevate voices to create that measurable change. But at the city level, potentially exploring what resources the city can do, because there are constituents in this district who are not students. There are very few, but there still are, so making sure they have the proper resources to reach what they need. I also am currently sitting on the mental health task force. We meet on Fridays, and just working on how we can create measurable solutions and ensuring that everyone, if they need mental health services, they can get those services, they can get their needs addressed without having to wait 35 days, without having to have an online listening session. That's something that University Health Services has said many times. Oh, you can talk to someone online or a computer. But like I said before, screens are not a way to build connection with people. It's that face-to-face connection, that conversation, and that's what we need to facilitate. And if represented, that's something I'm really passionate about myself, and I can assure you that if anyone wants to meet, they have concerns, I'm here, the door's open, and we will work together to fix that problem.
Thank you. Avra?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have direct experience with friends calling UHS through the university and then not being able to see a therapist or whoever they need to see for at least like a month and a half out. And then UHS has told them additionally that they should be seeking outside help and that UHS could help connect them to outside help, which shouldn't be the case. UHS should have those utilities on hand. And so I do think that the university needs to be investing more in mental health. However, I won't sit here and tell you that the city has control over the university's budget. So I believe that people going into government at this point in time in our lives should be optimists. They should work towards things that they might not have complete control over. So I want to work with the university and explain to them where students are coming from. But like I said, I'm also not going to tell you that the city has control over the UHS budget, because it doesn't.
All right, thank you. We do have time for one more question from the audience.
So yeah, living in Madison is really expensive, especially for those students who pay their own rent or their own groceries, and the current wages of the jobs here are just not anywhere close to the cost of living, much less the cost of tuition. So even the university actually routinely pays over 7.5 million. Being mindful that I'm pretty sure the state has banned municipalities from raising their individual minimum wages. Do you guys have any plans to what we could do to help grow the business?
Yeah, so I keep repeating this. Matthew and I are both students. We need a student at the seat who can fight for these things, because you couldn't be more right. Students aren't being paid enough, and those payments, even if you work 20, 25 hours a week for $10, it's not enough to pay your housing bill. And so in terms of how we can combat that, we need to get students to share their voices. And that's where I think that knocking doors comes into play. So having face-to-face contact and encouraging people to share their stories and letting them know how important their stories are is important. Because without those stories, then the stories are only coming from elected officials. And as encouraging as they are and as helpful as they are to say, hey, the minimum wage isn't high enough, it's not as impactful as students individually telling their own stories to the government.
So I think, to address that issue, that's something I've heard from many people as well.